Hello, my kiddos. Right, last time when we finished, Merry and Pippin were with Treebeard at the Entmoot, which is basically a big council of Ents. And that's where we pick it up. I wonder where Isengard is, said Pippin. I don't know quite where we are, said Merry, but that peak is probably Methydras. As far as I can remember, the ring of Isengard lies in a fork or deep cleft at the end of the mountains. It is probably down behind this great ridge. There seems to be a smoke or haze over there, left of the peak, don't you think? What is Isengard like? Said Pippin. I wonder what Ents can do about it anyway. So do I, said Merry. Isengard is a sort of ring of rocks or hills, I think, with a flat space inside and an island or pillar of rock in the middle called Orthanc. Saruman has a tower on it. There is a gate, perhaps more than one, in the encircling wall, and I believe there is a stream running through it. It comes out of the mountains and flows on across the Gap of Rohan. It does not seem the sort of place for Ents to tackle. But I have an odd feeling about these Ents. Somehow I don't think they are quite as safe and, well, funny as they seem. They seem slow, queer, and patient, almost sad, and yet I believe they could be roused if that happened. I would rather not be on the other side. Yes, said Pippin. I know what you mean. There might be all the difference between an old cow sitting and thoughtfully chewing and a bull charging, and the change might come suddenly. I wonder if Treebeard still will rouse them. I am sure he means to try, but they don't like being roused. Treebeard got roused himself last night, and then bottled it up again. The hobbits turned back. The voices of the Ents were still rising and falling in their conclave. The sun had now risen high enough to look over the high hedge. It gleamed on the tops of the birches and lit the northward side of the dingle with a cool yellow light. There they saw a little glittering fountain. They walked along the rim of the great bowl at their feet of the evergreens. It was pleasant to feel cool grass about their toes again, and not to be in a hurry. And then they climbed down to the gushing water. They drank a little, a clean, cold, sharp draught, and sat down on a mossy stone, watching the patches of sun on the grass and the shadows of the sailing clouds passing over the floor of the dingle. The murmur of the Ents went on. It seemed a very strange and remote place, outside their world, and far from everything that had ever happened to them. A great longing came over them for the faces and voices of their companions, especially for Frodo and Sam, and for Strider. At last there came a pause in the Ent voices, and looking up they saw Treebeard coming toward them, with another Ent at his side. Here I am again, said Treebeard. Are you getting weary or feeling impatient? Well, I'm afraid that you must not get impatient yet. We have finished the first stage now, but I have still got to explain things again to those that live a long way off, far from Isengard, and those that I could not get round to before the moot. And after that we shall have to decide what to do. However, deciding what to do does not take Ents so long as going over all the facts and events that they have to make up their minds about. Still, it is no use denying. We shall be here a long time yet, a couple of days very likely. So I have brought you a companion. He has an Ent house nearby. Bregalad is his elvish name. He says he has already made up his mind and does not need to remain at the moot. He is the nearest thing among us to a hasty Ent. You ought to get on together. Goodbye. Treebeard turned and left them. Bregalad stood for some time surveying the hobbits solemnly, and they looked at him, wondering when he would show any signs of hastiness. He was tall and seemed to be one of the younger Ents. He had smooth shining skin on his arms and legs. His lips were ruddy, and his hair was gray-green. He could bend and sway like a slender tree in the wind. At last he spoke, and his voice, though resonant, was higher and clearer than Treebeard's. My friends, let us go for a walk, he said. I am Bregalad. That is Quickbeam in your language, but it is only a nickname, of course. They have called me that ever since I said yes to an elder Ent before he had finished his question. Also, I drink quickly and go out while some are still wetting their beards. Come with me. He reached down 2 shapely arms and gave a long-fingered hand to each of the hobbits. All that day they walked about in the woods with him, singing and laughing, for Quickbeam often laughed. He laughed if the sun came out from behind a cloud. He laughed if they came upon a stream or spring. Then he stooped and splashed his feet and head with water. He laughed sometimes at some sound or whisper in the trees. Whenever he saw a rowan tree, he halted a while with his arms stretched out and sang and swayed as he sang. At nightfall he brought them to his Ent house, nothing more than a mossy stone set upon the turves under a green bank. Rowan trees grew in a circle about it, and there was water, as in all Ent houses, a spring bubbling out from the bank. They talked for a while as darkness fell in the forest. Not far away the voices of the Entmoot could be heard still going on, but now they seemed deeper and less leisurely, and every now and again one great voice would rise in a high and quickening music, while all the others died away. But beside them, Bregalad spoke gently in their own tongue, almost whispering, and they learned that he belonged to Skinbark's people, and the country where they had lived had been ravaged. That seemed to the hobbits quite enough to explain his hastiness, at least in the matter of orcs. There were 2 rowan trees in my home, said Bregalad, softly and sadly. Rowan trees that took root when I was an Enting, many, many years ago in the quiet of the world. The oldest were planted by the Ents to try and please the Entwives, but they looked at them and smiled and said that they knew where whiter blossoms and richer fruit were growing. Boy, those Entwives are kind of picky and demanding. Yet there are no trees of all that race, the people of the rose, that are so beautiful to me. And these trees grew and grew, till the shadow of each tree was like a green hall, and their red berries in the autumn were a burden, and a beauty and a wonder. Birds used to flock there. I like birds, even when they chatter. And the rowan has enough and to spare. But the birds became unfriendly and greedy, and tore at the trees, and threw the fruit down and did not eat it. Then orcs came with axes and cut down my trees. I came and called them by their long names, but they did not quiver. They did not hear or answer. They lay dead. O ora farne lacimista carni mirie. O rowan fair, upon your hair how white the blossom lay. O rowan mine, I saw you shine upon a summer's day. Your rind so bright, your leaves so light, your voice so cool and soft. Upon your head how golden red the crown you bore aloft. O rowan dead, upon your head your hair is dry and gray. Your crown is spilled, your voice is stilled forever and a day. O ora farne lacimista carni mirie. The hobbits fell asleep to the sound of the soft singing of Bregalad, that seemed to lament in many tongues the fall of trees that he had loved. The next day they spent also in his company, But they did not go far from his house. Most of the time they sat silent under the shelter of the bank, for the wind was cooler and the clouds closer and grayer. There was little sunshine, and in the distance the voices of the Ents and the Moot still rose and fell, sometimes loud and strong, sometimes low and sad, sometimes quickening, sometimes slow and solemn as a dirge. A second night came, and still the Ents held conclave under the hurrying clouds and fitful stars. The third day broke, bleak and windy. At sunrise the Ents' voices rose to a great clamor, and then died down again. As the morning wore on, the wind fell, and the air grew heavy with expectancy. The hobbits could see that Bergelad was now listening intently, although to them, down in the dell of his Ent house, the sound of the Moot was faint. The afternoon came, and the sun, going west towards the mountain, set out long yellow beams between the cracks and fissures of the clouds. Suddenly they were aware that everything was very quiet. The whole forest stood in listening silence. Of course the Ent voices had stopped. What did that mean? Bergelad was standing up erect and tense, looking back northwards toward Durndingle. Then with a crash came a great ringing shout. Rah, hoom, rah! The trees quivered and bent as if a gust had struck them. There was another pause, and then a marching music began like solemn drums, and above the rolling beats and booms their welled voices singing high and strong. We come, with roll of drum, ta-roonda, roonda, roonda, room. The Ents were coming. Ever nearer and louder rose their song. We come, with horn and drum, ta-roonda, roonda, roonda, room. Bergelad picked up the hobbits and strode from his house. Before long they saw the marching line approaching. The Ents were swinging along with great strides down the slope towards them. Treebeard was at their lead, and some 50 followers were behind them, 2 abreast, keeping step with their feet and beating time with their hands upon their flanks. As they drew near, the flash and flicker of their eyes could be seen. Hoom, hum, here we come with a boom, here we come at last, called Treebeard when he caught sight of Bergelad and the hobbits. Come and join the Moot, we are off to Isengard. To Isengard, the Ents cried in many voices. To Isengard! To Isengard, though Isengard be ringed and barred with doors of stone, though Isengard be strong and hard, as cold as stone and bare as bone. We go to war, to hew the stone and break the door, for bowl and bough are burning now, and furnace roars, we go to war. To land of gloom with tramp of doom, with roll of drum, we come, to Isengard with doom we come, with doom we come, with doom we come. So they sang as they marched southwards. Bergelad, his eyes shining, swung into the line beside Treebeard. The old Ent now took the hobbits back and set them on his shoulders again, and so they rode proudly at the head of the singing company with beating hearts and heads held high. Though they had expected something to happen eventually, they were amazed at the change that had come over the Ents. It seemed now as sudden as the bursting of a flood that had long been held back by a dike. The Ents made up their minds rather quickly after all, didn't they? Pippin ventured to say after some time, when for a moment the singing paused and only the beating of hands and feet was heard. Quickly, said Treebeard. Yes, indeed, quicker than I expected. Indeed, I have not seen them roused like this for many an age. We Ents do not like being roused, and we never are roused unless it is clear to us that our trees and our lives are in great danger. That has not happened in this forest since the wars of Sauron and the Men of the Sea. It is the orc work, the wanton hewing, rarum, without even the bad excuse of feeding the fires. That has so angered us, and the treachery of a neighbor, who should have helped us. Wizards ought to know better. They do know better. There is no cursing, elvish, entish, or the tongues of men bad enough for such treachery. Down with Saruman! Will you really break down the doors of Isengard? Asked Merry. Oh, well, we could, you know. You do not know, perhaps, how strong we are. Maybe you have heard of trolls? They are mighty strong, but trolls are only counterfeits, made by the enemy in the great darkness in mockery of the Ents. As orcs were of elves, we are stronger than trolls. We are made of the bones of the earth. We can split stone like the roots of trees, only quicker, far quicker, if our minds are roused. If we are not hewn down or destroyed by fire or blast of sorcery, we could split Isengard into splinters and crack its walls into rubble. But Saruman will try to stop you, won't he? Yes, that is so. I have not forgotten it. Indeed, I have thought long about it. But you see, many of the Ents are younger than I am, by many lives of trees. They are all roused now, and their mind is all on one thing, breaking Isengard. But they will start thinking again before long. They will cool down a little when we take out our evening drink. What a thirst we shall have! But let them march now and sing. We have a long way to go, and there is time ahead for thought. It is something to have started. Treebeard marched on, singing with the others for a while, but after a time his voice died to a murmur and fell silent again. Pippin could see that his old brow was wrinkled and knotted. At last he looked up, and Pippin could see a sad look in his eyes. Sad, but not unhappy. There was a light in them, as if the green flame had sunk deeper into the dark wells of his thought. Of course, it is likely enough, my friends, he said slowly, likely enough that we are going to our doom, the last march of the Ents. But if we stayed at home and did nothing, doom would find us anyway, sooner or later. That thought has long been growing in our hearts, and that is why we are marching now. It was not a hasty resolve. Now at least the last march of the Ents may be worth a song. Aye, he sighed, we may help the other peoples before we pass away. Still, I should have liked to see the songs come true about the Entwives. I should dearly have liked to see Fimbrethil again. But there, my friends, songs, like trees, bear fruit only in their own time and their own way, and sometimes they are withered untimely. The Ents went striding on at a great pace. They had descended into a long fold of the land and that fell away southward. Now they began to climb up and up onto the high western ridge. The woods fell away, and they came to scattered groups of birch, and then to bare slopes where only a few gaunt pine trees grew. The sun sank behind the dark hill back in front. The sun sank behind the dark hill back in front. Gray dusk fell. Pippin looked behind. The number of the Ents had grown, or what was happening? Where the dim bare slopes that they had crossed should lie. He thought he saw groves of trees, but they were moving. Could it be that the trees of Fangorn were awake, and the forest was rising, marching over the hills to war? He rubbed his eyes, wondering if sleep and shadow had deceived him, but the great gray shapes moved steadily onward. There was a noise like wind in many branches. The Ents were drawing near the crest of the ridge now, and all song had ceased. Night fell. There was silence. Nothing was to be heard save a faint quiver of the earth beneath the feet of the Ents, and a rustle, the shade of a whisper of many drifting leaves. At last they stood upon the summit and looked down into a dark pit, the great cleft at the end of the mountains. Nan Kuronir, the Valley of Saruman. Night lies over Isengard. said Treebeard. End of chapter 4. I love you always and forever, no matter what.